Picture a dimly lit stage. It's the 1980s. There's a young woman behind the drum kit, and she is absolutely thrashing away to Black Sabbath.
Right, and we're not talking about just tapping along.
No, not at all. She's hitting the skins with such violent intensity that she actually keeps 4 spare drumsticks in her bag because she knows the first 2 are going to snap under the pressure.
That's an incredible image.
And it doesn't stop there. She rides a heavy Kawasaki motorcycle to school, runs with the rebellious Bozozoku gang, and openly defies her parents, who, by the way, refuse to pay for her education. So looking at this, this leather-clad rebel, you'd naturally assume you were watching the origin story of a counterculture icon.
Someone who's going to fight the system, dismantle tradition.
Exactly. But fast forward 40 years, and the script just flips completely. That same drummer is now the face of the establishment itself. This is Sanae Takeuchi, Japan's Iron Lady.
And this is where the real story begins.
Because instead of the progressive trailblazer her youth suggested, she has emerged as an ultra-conservative nationalist. She opposes separate surnames for married women. She openly visits controversial shrines honoring war criminals.
It's a jarring cognitive dissonance, isn't it?
It really is. You have a leader who once wore miniskirts on TV as this bubbly modern anchor.
Yeah.
Now she's endorsing books that praise Hitler's election strategies and declaring she will eliminate the concept of work-life balance entirely to work and work and work.
So it just begs the question, how does a rebellious, heavy metal-loving outlier become the rigid defender of the hard right?
Is the rebellion actually gone? Or is she just channeling that same violent drumming energy into a different kind of power?
I think what's so fascinating here is precisely that core conflict you just laid out. You have this figure who, by all accounts, was a total outlier.
Right.
A self-made woman who completely rejected the traditional path that was expected of a young lady in Japan during that era. Yet today, she stands as the rigid defender of the social order.
Maintaining these staunchly conservative views on family, on history, on gender roles.
Exactly. And this journey where her personal rebellion is somehow channeled into enforcing a rigid national identity, that's what we really need to unpack.
Because that narrative seems to be resonating.
Oh, powerfully. It resonates with a huge segment of the Japanese public who are, searching for a strong, unapologetic national identity in a really rapidly changing, economically challenging world.
That transition, then, from heavy metal rebel to the rigid defender of tradition, that's the thread we're pulling on in this deep dive. So our mission for you, the listener, is to dissect this highly unconventional path.
And to understand how it translates into a distinct model of leadership.
Yeah, this isn't just about reading a policy outline. It's about understanding a massive political and societal experiment that is transforming Japan's self-perception in the 21st century. And we really need to focus on why this former rebel is drawing such massive, unprecedented support.
Especially from the younger generation. The very people you'd think would reject her.
So I think that's the starting point. We have to understand the source of her political power, which seems to be rooted entirely in that origin story.
It is. So let's look at the crafting of this maverick image.
Okay, let's unpack this biography. Takeuchi was born in 1961 in Nara Prefecture. Her background was working class.
Right. Her father was a car mechanic. Her mother was in the local police force. Which
is already an unusual grounding for a future prime minister, especially when you compare it to the generational political families you so often find in the LDP.
That working class background immediately establishes her as an outsider. She wasn't handed a seat or groomed in the elite corridors of Tokyo politics.
But the real moment of crystallization for that narrative came after high school. Takeuchi was a great student. She even got into elite private universities.
But her parents refused to pay her tuition fees.
And that decision is so crucial. It wasn't about her ability. It was about societal expectation.
Their reasoning was explicit, wasn't it?
It was. They felt a young lady didn't need further institutional education. That decision wasn't just a financial refusal. It was a denial of her ambition, based purely on her gender and on tradition.
It was a profound challenge to her agency. And instead of conforming, which, would have been the easy and expected path.
Get a job, maybe marry early.
Exactly. Instead of that, she just doubled down on persistence. She enrolled in business administration at Kobe University. But to make it work, she had to commute 6 hours a day.
6 hours, round trip. Every single day.
And she had to pay for her entire education herself through part-time work. This experience right here This is what solidified her image as a fierce, independent self-starter.
This level of persistence isn't just, tough. It reveals a really deep-seated determination to defy the constraints that were imposed on her.
And that independence didn't just stop with her commute. It manifested in a highly rebellious public persona that actively rejected the typical good Japanese girl image of the 1980s.
Precisely. She was riding Kawasaki heavy motorbikes, which were loud, they were fast, and they were distinctly anti-establishment.
And she went even further than that by joining a Bosozoku gang, which were basically these motorbike gangs known for their rebellious attitude and, well, often disruptive behavior.
Yeah, for you, the listener, if you're not familiar with the 80s Japanese social landscape, Bosozoku represented a real countercultural movement.
It was largely made up of disenfranchised or just bored youth who rejected the strict social contract. So for a university student, let alone a young woman, to be a part of that,
it was an extreme statement of defiance against the very social fabric her parents represented.
And that's where the personal narrative turns into this foundational political myth. This is her teenage rebellion against the pressure to just settle into a predefined female role.
She later wrote about this desire for escape and autonomy in her 1992 memoir, saying, and I'm quoting here, "I dreamed of having my own castle."
And that quote, "I dreamed of having my own castle," it speaks directly to her ambition for absolute control, for sovereignty over her own life. It contrasts so sharply with her mother's traditional views.
I read her mother wouldn't even let her move out because she hadn't found a husband yet.
Exactly. So Takeuchi literally fought her way out of that cage.
And we cannot gloss over the heavy metal connection. It's such a powerful, visceral detail.
It really is.
She wasn't just a casual fan. She was the drummer in a student rock band, and she was deeply influenced by Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden.
And we know she drummed so hard that she carried 4 spare sticks with her, just knowing the first 2 would snap under the intensity.
It's a literal metaphor for the relentless, high-impact force she brings to everything she does. It's also fascinating that she apparently still uses drumming today to relieve stress.
The list of her non-traditional interests is just so long. You have the rock and roll drummer, a black belt in karate, an avid scuba diver, and a fan of high-speed motorbike racing manga like Bari Densetsu.
Right. This is not the standard resume you see among the political elite in Japan.
Not even close.
So before the hard politics began, she smartly leveraged that unconventional image into a media career. She actually started by interning for U.S. Congresswoman Pat Schroeder in 1987.
Which gave her early exposure to, Western legislative processes.
And when she returned to Japan in '89, she launched a career as a broadcaster and author.
And she presented herself as explicitly unconventional and trailblazing. She was an anchor for TV Asahi and Fuji TV.
She was famous for wearing miniskirts. Again, a very visible, very modern choice that contrasted sharply with the staid, colorless image of Japanese politicians at the time.
It was this electric public personality built entirely on being different.
She used the media to build a brand of modernity, of independence. And then came the jump to formal politics. After a narrow loss in '92, she was successfully elected to the Diet in 1993.
As an independent initially, before eventually joining the LDP.
And that early period, the raw fight, the refusal to quit, the self-funding that established her public narrative.
This is where we need to connect the dots for the listener. This self-made narrative, it provides her with this profound authenticity and, grit that older, traditional LDP politicians,
who often inherit their seats from their fathers or grandfathers,
they fundamentally lack that. She earned it.
That's a fascinating insight. So if the grit is the policy, does that mean her supporters forgive the policy details because the personality is just so compelling?
For many voters, absolutely. Think of a working-class man like Kenji. He's not necessarily focused on the minutia of corporate tax policy.
Right.
When he talks about Takeuchi, he lights up because she rides motorcycles, she plays the drums. For him, her heavy metal past isn't trivia or some youthful indiscretion. It's tangible proof of a fighting spirit.
It proves she understands struggle and is willing to, break bones to achieve a goal.
So her image as the ultimate survivor of a patriarchal system, someone who was actively denied an education by her own family, yet clawed her way to the top.
It provides a vicarious sense of strength to citizens who feel invisible or overlooked by the traditional political class.
Yes. She's the rebel who succeeded within the system, which gives her a unique platform to now define the system.
And that rebellious past is key to justifying the rigidity of her current stance.
It is. The logic goes something like this. If she, an outlier, could overcome those traditional expectations through sheer will and hard work, then her current call for national strength, for productivity, for social cohesion,
It's seen by her supporters as an authentic, proven path to national greatness.
exactly, not just empty rhetoric from an inherited political dynasty. It allows her appeal to cut across traditional conservative lines because she's perceived as a reformer, albeit a very right-wing one.
Okay, so that narrative of grit clearly works, especially when we look at the extraordinary support she's garnered, particularly among the youth. The survey results are just stunning.
They are a dramatic shift. While the nationwide support for her cabinet is high, sitting around 70%, the youth metrics are truly unprecedented.
Unprecedented is the word. In a poll conducted shortly after she took office, support among those aged 18 to 39 reached a staggering 80%.
80%. Just to put that into perspective for you. Contrast that with the previous cabinet, the Ishiba cabinet, where support for that same 18 to 39 group was only 15%.
15. This is a political earthquake, not a shift.
It's an astonishing leap. And it's a broad capture of the working population, too. Support among the 40 to 59 age group is also exceptionally high, at 75%.
And even among the 60 and over demographic, the rate is 63%.
The previous administration actually saw relatively stronger support from older generations, which suggests the Takeuchi cabinet is genuinely being bolstered by younger people.
And this trend of strong youth support mirrors the dynamics we saw during the second cabinet of Shinzo Abe.
Which suggests she's tapping into a powerful, proven political energy among the young electorate.
What's also important is the gender neutrality of her support. We might have anticipated that Japan's first female PM would receive, lopsided female backing.
But that's not the case at all.
No. The survey shows 71% of men and 72% of women support her new cabinet. Again, a huge contrast to the Ishiba cabinet, where support was in the 30s for both genders.
This broad support indicates that her appeal is transcending simple identity politics. It's about substance, or at least the perception of substance.
And regionally, her strength is notable. Shubu at 81%, Kinki at 76%.
Right, and this high regional strength reflects her Nara origins and the strategic coalition she formed with the Japan Innovation Party, or Isshin no Kai.
Which holds significant power in the Kansai region.
And that coalition is proving highly effective in consolidating regional support. It's linking traditional LDP machinery with a strong regional reform-minded partner.
So, if the support is so strong and so broad, why are the youth specifically responding to her? When respondents were asked to choose a reason for supporting the cabinet, what came out on top?
Expectations for its policies was the top choice at 41%.
Okay, so policy is number one.
Followed by the pragmatic choice of no suitable alternative at 20%, and the Prime Minister demonstrates leadership at 15%.
Those numbers paint a picture of a pragmatic, almost desperate vote for hard action.
I think that's right. Younger Japanese citizens have lived their entire conscious lives during the so-called lost decades, experiencing economic stagnation, rising debt, and a political system where nothing tangible seems to change.
They felt past prime ministers were incompetent or just too weak.
And Takeuchi promises drastic and unpopular, but necessary hard action. Crucially, she is being honest that it's not going to be easy, which translates into authenticity for a generation that's really skeptical of soft promises.
This feeds directly into the anti-establishment paradox. Younger voters are increasingly aligning with anti-status quo parties, like Sanseido.
Right. Sanseido is anti-status quo and even outperformed the LDP among some young voters by offering a strong, nationalist, critical alternative.
And this is where Takeuchi's strategy comes into play.
It is. Her aggressive pivot to the hard right within the LDP, essentially adopting a much more nationalistic, action-oriented stance than her predecessors, is seen as a strategic move that absorbs this anti-status quo energy.
So the analysis is that because Takeuchi successfully dominated the LDP and became prime minister, the political support of the younger generation moves from that fringe alternative, Sanseido, back to the LDP.
Exactly. They no longer needed the fringe because Takeuchi's LDP was now sufficiently radical to satisfy that yearning for fundamental change and strong, visible leadership.
Had the LDP remained centrist and cautious, like under Kishida and Ishiba,
they risked hemorrhaging those crucial young and frustrated votes to fringe movements. Takeuchi essentially became the antidote to her own party's inertia.
But let's introduce some critical thinking here. We also see critiques, especially online, suggesting that this support is superficial or based on the vibe over genuine policy engagement.
The idea that it's just about her image.
Yeah, there are assertions that many young people know next to nothing about politics and just see someone who is presentable and strong on TV. This is amplified by the fact that the previous PM, Ishiba, was explicitly criticized in some media for his looks and his awkward mannerisms.
The idea that political preferences are reduced to swiping left or swiping right is a provocative critique. And Takeuchi, leveraging her former media career, certainly understands presentation and gravitas. She projects strength.
She does.
However, I think minimizing youth support to merely superficiality is arguably reductive.
I agree. It minimizes their lived experience. If young people have grown up during a period of economic decline, facing uncertain job prospects, rising national debt, housing affordability issues, they are acutely aware of the failure of the status quo.
They're interested in profound political change, and they're receptive to a distinct, unapologetic agenda because they feel the current trajectory is failing them economically and socially.
It's a pragmatic calculation. They see her honesty about the difficulty ahead and her willingness to implement drastic, potentially unpopular measures. And they perceive that as the kind of decisive leadership necessary to restore the economy.
They're looking for someone strong enough to break the cycle of stagnation, even if that means embracing conservative social policies they might personally disagree with. The emphasis is on results and national strength above all else.
Okay, let's transition now from the compelling image to the actual policy blueprint she's using to drive this change. The term Iron Lady is used repeatedly, clearly referencing Margaret Thatcher, whom Takeuchi openly admires.
But her personal journey as a pioneer, the first female PM, creates this extreme cognitive dissonance with her policy stances, especially on social issues.
It creates a tension best captured by the phrase, "the pioneer who guards the gate."
Despite breaking the ultimate glass ceiling, Takeuchi maintains these ultra-conservative views on social matters. She is seen by some critics as adopting the traditional male LDP ideology so completely that she's become an honorary man.
Reinforcing the traditional power structure rather than dismantling it.
Exactly.
Let's start with family and gender roles. She is deeply resistant to progressive gender reforms. She specifically opposes the option for married women to have separate surnames.
Arguing that it threatens social cohesion and the traditional family unit, she also maintains staunch support for male-only imperial succession, despite public opinion polls showing that support for a female ruler hovers around 70%.
This is where the paradox becomes deeply personal for her supporters. I mean, think about Yumi, a working mother from Takeuchi's hometown.
Right.
Yumi admires Takeuchi the pioneer, the woman who overcame the expectation of being the good wife, wise mother to achieve great power. Yet she worries that Takeuchi is now using her power not to enable future women,
but to reinforce those very traditional values.
That worry that Takeuchi is using the iron to forge a cage for the next generation of women is potent. What is the mechanism of her reasoning here?
Her stance suggests that her own success is proof that the existing system is adequate for those with enough grit. She argues that maintaining a unified family surname and traditional social structures is essential for the collective national identity.
Prioritizing cohesion over individual rights, a classic conservative position.
And the separate surname issue is highly symbolic. It represents the last political frontier for gender equality in Japan, and she is steadfastly guarding that gate.
And then there's the work ethic. In a country struggling severely with issues of karoshi or overwork, she declared her intent to eliminate the concept of work-life balance entirely.
Publicly vowing to work and work and work and work and work.
It's a profound statement that signals an absolute commitment to national duty and productivity above individual well-being.
It aligns perfectly with the nationalistic push for strength and results. For younger people who value decisiveness, this is seen not as a threat, but as proof of her willingness to put national success first, even if it requires personal sacrifice.
It's an aggressive rejection of what she perceives as Western softness.
We must also address her deeply nationalistic ideology, which is perhaps her most controversial area internationally. Takeuchi has a history of historical revisionism.
She has lobbied for a nationalistic depiction of the Japanese Empire's actions in World War II in school textbooks, has called war crimes exaggerated, and she openly visits the Yasukuni Shrine.
And context is essential here. The Yasukuni Shrine honors Japanese war dead, including, controversially, 14 class war criminals convicted by the International Military Tribunal for the Far East.
So visits by high-level politicians, including Takeuchi, are viewed by neighboring nations as symbolic affirmations of historical revisionism.
And a lack of remorse for Japan's wartime actions. Takeuchi, for her part, views her visits as a personal act of respect for the country's honored dead, asserting that historical perception should be domestically determined.
The controversy over her affiliations also raises serious questions about the political risks she's willing to take. I mean, the sources cite her commending a book titled Hitler's Election Strategy, a Bible for certain victory in modern elections.
Yes, that connection caused immense political fallout. She was quoted saying that the key to winning is to have a strong will, as supposedly indicated by the book's author.
And while she has distanced herself from the more inflammatory parts, the political damage stems from the book containing material that even suggests that voters you cannot persuade should be eliminated.
Which the author tried to clarify meant preventing them from political engagement, not violence, but the context is profoundly unsettling.
And this feeds into the perception of her ultra-nationalist base. She later denied knowing the identity of a known neo-Nazi leader with whom she was photographed in 2014.
Claiming she simply accepted a photo request from an unknown person. But these consistent affiliations with ultranationalist figures and revisionist texts, they fuel concerns about her commitment to liberal democratic norms.
We should also mention her deep involvement with Nippon Kaigi, the far-right lobby group.
Right. They advocate for revising Article 9 of the Constitution, which establishes Japan's pacifist stance,
forbidding it from having a standing army and initiating wars. And Takeuchi has fully supported this constitutional revision.
Nippon Kaigi's stated aim is to change the post-war national consciousness based on the Tokyo Tribunal's view of history. Her deep ties to this powerful establishment group further solidify her position on the hard right.
Okay, let's pivot to national security and defense, where she is decidedly a hawk through and through.
She's a clear protege of former PM Abe, but is often seen as even more conservative and aggressive on defense strategy.
She understands that global dynamics are shifting. While China is building its economic and military power, the U.S., which Japan relies heavily on for security, is signaling that allies must shoulder more of their own defense burden.
And Takeuchi views defense spending not as a cost, but as a necessary investment in sovereignty and global influence.
Her commitments here are specific and rapid. She pledged to boost the Japanese defense budget to at least 2% of GDP by March 2026.
That timeline is significant. It pushes the goal 2 years ahead of the previous government's schedule. And she is committed to revising and toughening Japan's current security strategies to reflect a more assertive geopolitical posture.
This assertive posture is grounded in strong global alignment. She calls the U.S.-Japan alliance the cornerstone of security policy, citing her successful October 2025 summit with President Trump.
She also plans to deepen ties with key Indo-Pacific partners, specifically mentioning South Korea, India, Australia, and the Philippines, creating a web of security arrangements to stabilize the region.
And regarding China,
she maintains cautious engagement, calling China an important neighbor, and emphasizing the need for stable diplomatic channels.
One of the most significant shifts, though, is the drive for defense industrialization. Her administration plans to liberalize the Japanese defense industry,
which means removing long-standing restrictions on arms exports and actively encouraging the building of private weapons factories.
This is a major break with Japan's long-held pacifist principles rooted in Article 9.
It is. By removing export restrictions, she aims to strengthen Japan's technological base and increase its geopolitical leverage. They will invest heavily in defense R&D, including high-tech projects like sixth-generation fighter jets and hypersonic missiles.
The goal is to revitalize the defense sector, which currently accounts for less than 2% of global defense shipments due to decades of restrictions.
Turning defense production into an economic driver?
That strategic focus on technology and growth extends directly to her economic policy, which is often termed Abenomics Redux. How does her economic agenda compare to the original Abenomics?
Well, Abenomics was famously built on 3 arrows: aggressive monetary easing, massive fiscal stimulus, and structural reform. Takeuchi embraces the aggressive stimulus and strategic investment.
But her version is characterized by a heavy focus on supply chain resilience, strategic domestic investment, and deregulation tailored to specific high-tech sectors.
The core mechanism is a massive stimulus package exceeding 13.9 trillion yen, or about $90 billion US.
And where is this money targeted?
It's designed to hit 2 major areas: corporate investment and household support. She supports tax reforms aimed at stimulating growth, like raising the income tax exemption threshold to put more money directly into households.
And abolishing the provisional gasoline tax, which immediately impacts cost of living.
Exactly. And strategically, she is prioritizing domestic corporate investment in key future-oriented areas: AI, semiconductors, and biotechnology.
Her argument is that targeted deregulation and government support for strategic partnerships will attract foreign direct investment and rebuild critical supply chains,
making Japan less dependent on external shocks. Economists note that while this is sound on paper, Japan needs to continue making fundamental improvements in its notoriously risk-averse corporate culture if it expects private companies to aggressively pursue these high-risk, high-reward strategic areas.
But her emphasis is heavily on top-down growth and innovation.
Yes. And finally, energy and supply chain security are major components. To bring down prices and stabilize the economy, she plans to expand energy subsidies and increase imports of U.S. liquefied natural gas.
And to secure industrial supply chains, she supports a joint U.S.-Japan framework to secure rare earths and critical minerals.
A move explicitly aimed at reducing dependency on external suppliers for key components necessary for her strategic growth sectors like electronics and defense. These policy moves are all interwoven, aiming to create a self-sufficient, technologically dominant, and culturally cohesive Japan.
This brings us to the core synthesis of our deep dive. Takeuchi's governance isn't just a political phase, it's an attempt to establish an alternative modernity.
We heard from Mr. Tanaka, the elderly artisan in Kyoto, who views Takeuchi's policies as a necessary correction against global trends and Western liberalization.
Mr. Tanaka's perspective reflects a wider anxiety. He sees Western chains replacing local shops. He feels the unique rhythm of Japanese life and culture is being eroded.
And he fears Japan is losing its distinct identity to globalization, becoming just another generic modern state that simply follows the lead of Western liberalization.
So Takeuchi, with her strong stance on tradition, heritage, and history, represents an anchor for him. His perspective is that her rejection of Western liberal paradigms, like excessive individualism, is seen by supporters not as oppression or stagnation,
but as essential for maintaining social cohesion.
For him and others who share this view, her nationalism isn't about aggression toward others, but an unapologetic, necessary love for the country and its traditions.
He believes that under her leadership, Japan can finally stop trying to be a pale imitation of a Western ally and start being a proud, distinct civilization again, defining its own path to modernization.
This leads us to synthesize Takeuchi's distinct model. She is pairing aggressive economic liberalization and massive technology investment with social traditionalism and strong nationalism.
The underlying goal is to create a powerful, technologically advanced state that prioritizes cultural uniqueness and internal cohesion over strict adherence to Western liberal social norms.
She is making the argument that a modern nation does not have to sacrifice its distinct culture or traditions to succeed.
And that unique balance, the marriage of economic growth and social rigidity, is precisely what drew international investors' attention. The immediate market reaction to her rise was enthusiasm and rapid activity.
Absolutely. Japanese equities surged dramatically. The Nikkei 225 price index rose almost 25%, breaking 52,000 for the first time.
All fueled by strong expectations of decisive, Abe-like stimulus spending. Analysts predict the best-performing sectors will be defense and aerospace due to that massive 2% GDP pledge semiconductors and AI and export industries.
But the economic plan creates significant internal tensions, especially regarding monetary policy. Her dovish stance signaling pressure on the Bank of Japan to slow interest rate hikes has complex financial consequences for you to consider.
Right. Can I explain that monetary link simply?
Please. If she advocates for massive fiscal stimulus, so spending, and simultaneously pressures the BOJ to keep rates low, a dovish monetary stance, what happens?
Okay, so when a government spends massively, it often results in higher debt issuance, more Japanese government bonds, or JGBs. If the BOJ delays further rate increases under her influence, the combination of massive debt and relatively low rates signals a risk of inflation down the line.
Okay.
That risk, coupled with the fiscal concerns, will likely keep JGB yields relatively high due to investor anxiety about long-term stability. And crucially, that combination massive stimulus and continued dovishness from the central bank may further pressure the Japanese yen.
Keeping it weak relative to the dollar and the euro.
Exactly.
Which means the yen remains weak, supporting those export industries, but raising import costs for essentials like energy and food. It's a delicate balancing act designed to prioritize large-scale corporate growth and export competitiveness.
Even at the expense of domestic consumption power.
So, to summarize the core finding of this deep dive, Takeuchi Sanae's intensely personal story of defying traditional expectations paradoxically provides her with a unique political capital needed to enforce those same traditional expectations on society.
That motorcycle riding, heavy metal drummer who refused to conform has won the loyalty of a young generation desperate for drastic change and strong, results-oriented leadership.
Her administration represents a distinct push to redefine what it means to be a modern, developed nation in the 21st century. It is a model of alternative modernity that prioritizes cultural distinction, internal cohesion, and national strength in a complex and challenging global environment.
And the narrative of the heavy metal rebel turned rigid nationalist is the powerful engine driving this profound political and societal experiment.